Did you hear that?
Yep, got
It's
it.
on. It's on. Okay, Courtney, can you spell your name for me?
Yeah, Courtney.
Yeah, see, I wrote it wrong on my paper.
That's okay. There's a million ways to spell it.
Um, Thank you. Are you okay with us sharing this recording of your story publicly?
Yeah, definitely.
Can you or anyone you may mention in your story face legal prosecution due to anything that you share in your story?
No.
Thank you. Yeah, so identify however you want. I'm gonna mute myself. Thank you so much for doing this.
No, thank you. So my name's Courtney. I'm a recovering alcoholic addict. My sober date is October 10th, 2016. Born and raised in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. Still here, freezing my ass off. So my story starts with, I'll start with my mom. I'll start with my childhood. So my mom had me when she was really young. And my dad really, really struggles still to this day with addiction, whether it be alcohol, sex, drugs, gambling. My mom is a quiet, like loving, caring, compassionate person, and my dad is like her polar opposite. So my father has a lot of trauma that he never dealt with, and my dad is Cree. So I'm Indigenous and I belong to the Métis Nation of Alberta. And unfortunately, within the Indigenous community, there's a lot of addiction and poverty and intergenerational trauma. Um, and so I kind of grew up in an environment where I thought everybody's family got together and drank the way we did. Um, my childhood, I loved being with my family and my cousins all the time. We loved playing guitar and getting together for dinners, but every weekend was booze all the time. It was always booze. Um, I remember being as young as probably like 4 or 5, walking around these family parties where the kids would like run wild and the parents would be drinking, and I'd be walking around like sipping the piss out of the beer bottles. Um, and so my drinking started really early, like not to the point where I was getting out of control, but I was introduced to it really early. I grew up at the track. So my dad had harness racing horses, and I was placing bets with him when I was like 8. So I was gambling on horses, hockey, football. That was kind of like our bond, right? Like that was what I did with my dad. Um, so when it comes to my family, like I said, there's a lot of addiction and a lot of trauma. We didn't have a lot of money growing up. Like we always struggled, but it was because of the fact that like we got this big settlement when my mom was pregnant with me. We got a lot of money from a car accident, and my dad used it all to buy horses. And we were living in low income housing. So, throughout my childhood, we would like struggle for, food, or we had to pawn our car a few times. Like I didn't even know you could do that, but back in the day you could. And I had to lie a lot to my mom. So I grew up hiding a lot of my dad's secrets. He would take me to this really seedy bar in Edmonton called the Dover. And it's in a really bad area where like you drive by and you lock the doors, you don't get out, you don't look at anybody, you don't want to stop at the red light. And he had this old Cordoba, like an old 76 Cordoba with like a T-bar sunroof, and it didn't lock. So I was like 8 or 9, but I was terrified because like I couldn't go into the bar, right? Like I can't go in and make bets. So I had to stay in the car, and I would hide under the footboard. And like there were people drinking and drugging in the parking lot a lot of the time. And I was terrified that one of them were going to come and like steal me, or something bad would happen, and I'd be terrified. And my mom never knew any of this was going on because my dad would tell her that he would take me swimming or we would go watch a movie or whatever, and I'd have to lie to her. Um, and I think a little part of her knew, but my dad was so unhealthy. that he was extremely abusive. So it was like walking on eggshells a lot of my childhood. It was, you never knew if you were going to get like Jekyll or Hyde. And so I grew up with a lot of fear of my father. And I just, I struggled really like a lot in my younger years because I never had that love with him. I always had the sports betting. Sports betting was our thing. But we didn't have like a deeper connection. There was something off. The drinking really took away from our relationship. And so throughout the years, the abuse with my dad got really bad. So some of my earliest memories are like of my dad abusing my mom. Like there were times where he'd come home from the bar and my mom would shove the chair underneath the door so he couldn't get in. We'd have to call the police. It was kind of a regular thing. I remember one particular night where like he had got physical with her and I was so scared that he was going to hurt her that I finally like mustered up enough strength to go up to him. And while this is happening, it was terrifying. And I said, like, please stop. Like, you're going to hurt her. Please stop. And he looked at her and then looked at me and he took it out on my mom. Like, look at what you did, you know? So from that moment on, things got a lot worse with the violence between my parents. My dad was constantly cheating on my mom. And they stayed together for a really long time. So the family home was kind of it was a hard place to be. I have a full brother who's 3 years younger than me. So the two of us kind of just stayed together and tried to stay away from him because we didn't want to say or do anything to like upset him. Fast forward a little bit to, I'd say, my teenage years. So I started drinking really heavily when I was 12. My parents got divorced when I was 12. Reason being, we were having another one of our family parties, and my dad had gone into my bedroom and fell asleep, passed out, woke up, didn't know I was there, and started talking to a woman on the phone. And it was like, hey, baby, all this stuff. And I'm like, wait a minute, like, what's going on? And I had just had enough at that point of all the lying and all the cheating and all the stealing and all the hate. And so I went into the living room. Everybody's drunk, drinking. All my aunts and uncles are there. My mom's there. And this is back when the phones had the cord on the wall. And I reached up and I pushed the speaker button and everyone heard everything. And so from that point on, my relationship with my dad was fractured. There was a lot of fallout from that, huge. Unfortunately, I knew the woman that he was with because I had met her before my mom even knew that they were together. Basically, like I had to keep the secret again that they were together. And so my outlet for my anger, my sadness, my depression was soccer. I played competitive soccer from the time I was like 8 all the way up until my mid 20s with the same group of girls. It was my therapy, really. I got my aggression out. That was how I dealt with things. But when my parents got divorced, my soccer, I still loved playing. I was still really good, but I started putting vodka in my water bottles, right? Like I started drinking on the field. I started fighting on the field. It got so brutal that Edmonton District Soccer had suspended me for a whole year because of a fight that I got into. It was a physical altercation where like the refs had to come in and pull people off. And I know like in hockey, that's not a big deal, but for like underage women's soccer, like that's not supposed to happen. So we had to have a hearing and the whole thing. And yeah, I couldn't play. So I didn't have an outlet anymore for my anger. And I wasn't allowed on the bench. I wasn't allowed in the dressing room. I had to sit up in the stands, like had no control over it. It just killed me. And so that's when my drinking kind of started to get out of control, but it was always with family. Like I wasn't partying with friends, I was partying with my family, like my cousins and stuff. So I always saw it as it being okay because it was like a barometer of, well, all of us are on the same level. So if, if this was bad, someone would say something. Um, it was just horrible. I I can't remember how this happened, but my little brother started talking about things that had happened with my dad. And I was the only person that he confided in. And so he had told me about a bunch of like abusive situations. And my brother took himself away from the family at that point. But nobody else would listen, believe him or me. And that's kind of when we both shelled up. We didn't want to talk about anything. We didn't want to put ourselves out there and be vulnerable just for someone to tell us that we're making things up. And my dad was so unhealthy that he wouldn't remember the bullshit that he told you, right? Like it would be like a piece of truth here and there. And he would constantly accuse people of what he was guilty of himself, right? So a lot of projecting and things like that. Now, when I was living with my dad, let's say I'm 16, 17 now, like very unhealthy. My parents are divorced. So my dad's living with his new wife. My mom's living with my stepdad, and I'm living in my dad's basement. Um, I didn't know this at the time, but I was being monitored. So there were cameras in the bathroom, there were cameras in the living room. My phone was tapped. Um, and this was so crazy that because of the gaslighting and the manipulation, like I thought I was making it up in my head. I would say things to friends on the phone because it was a corded phone on the wall. It wasn't a cell phone. And I would say things and he would bring it up later. And I'd be like, how the fuck you know that? Right. Like, and it just kind of threw me for a loop, but I didn't really think too much into it. And years later, these images would resurface. And it just devastated me because that's my dad. um and so even after that, somehow we never talked about it. I brought it up one time, and it was throwing things and breaking things and total what someone would do when you catch them in a lie red-handed, right? And I was so scared I didn't do anything about it. I shelled up and numbed out with booze and men. Like I started jumping from relationship to relationship because I was looking for that external validation, that love, that understanding and compassion that I was craving. Like I just felt like I couldn't give it to myself. Um, and so yeah, that's my relationship with my dad kind of in a nutshell. But one thing that was, I thought, good about the relationship with my stepdad and my stepmom is she kind of kept him under control. And when I say that, I mean like she would take the attention off of me and put it on her in a way to kind of like protect me, I feel like. And I see that now. I didn't see it back then, but I see it now. Um, I came from a family where like we had to work really hard for what we had. We didn't really ever have extra money, but we were happy. And my stepmom was very well off. She was very wealthy. She owned a restaurant in the city, property all over. And so all of a sudden, I went from like not really ever having new clothes for school and, not caring about that stuff. But she would take me to fancy restaurants and she was taking me shopping, and we would go on trips together. But booze was always involved. And so I got really close with her. But the same pattern started to repeat again, where my dad was being extremely secretive and shady and gambling all her money away, cheating on her all the time. It was absolutely brutal. So I again became kind of like the scapegoat, where I was keeping secrets and I wasn't allowed to say certain things to certain people. It was really hard. Now, that's my dad's side. On my mom's side, at this time, like I'm talking like 17-ish, I was dealing with a lot of sexual trauma from a different family member. So from the time I was 14 until I was about 25, 25 or 26, I experienced a lot of sexual trauma that really fucked me up. And so by then I was drinking every day. I had a good job, and that's why I thought I didn't have a problem, is because I was still making money, paying my bills. Um, but the drinking was excessive all the time. Something bad would always happen, right? Like I would get hurt or someone would get a DUI, and it just kept going. Um, all of my relationships ended up mirroring the abuse that I saw between my mom and my dad. And that was huge for me to recognize, because I never made the connection. I would always say, I'm never going to be like this. Like as I'm drinking, I'm never going to be an alcoholic. Right. And so, yeah, like it was just wild for me to be able to see it from like the other side of the fence. But, rolling up to, let's say, early 20s, I'm in a relationship with someone who I think I'm going to marry, like young love, right? And he's the first guy to ever kind of like stand up to my dad, right? And so my dad hated him, like started a physical fight with him. um and it just started this horrible like tug of war, like I control her, no, I control her. And I'm sitting there in the middle like, well, fuck me, like do I have a choice in this? Like not realizing that I did. Um but my dad all of a sudden started integrating himself into hanging out with me and my friends. And all of a sudden my dad, was saying, well, just bring your friends to the restaurant and we'll drink. It was always open bar, always all the food you can eat, just come over and that's it. You don't have to pay for anything. And looking back, like that's why I had so many friends. They weren't, I always felt this like feeling of being disposable. It was something I felt unworthy, unsafe, unloved. And so when my stepmom came in with this money, this life, and my friends were kind of reaping the benefits of it, I didn't look at it as them being my friends for what I had. I thought that we were friends because we were like friends. And that wasn't the case. So as my drinking got worse, nobody said anything to me. Nobody tried to help me because we were all on the same level. And eventually, when the booze stopped working, I went to cocaine because I was suicidal. My depression was spinning out of control. I couldn't function. I couldn't function. I didn't want to shower. I didn't want to brush my teeth. I didn't want to get up in the morning. And so when I was partying with my friends, cocaine was great because you drink and you feel like you're going to throw up or black out, and you just do a little bit of blow and you level it off and you like play this dangerous game of like trying to balance that out. It was horrible. And so yeah, the cocaine really, it took a hold of me really fast. And I did blow every weekend for like 3 years, and I would work Monday to Friday. And every Monday I would say, fuck this, is a disgusting drug. I'm never doing it again. Tuesday would roll around and I'd be like, well, fuck. And then stress, this, that, excuses, and I deserve it. How does it go from I'm never doing this again to I deserve it? I deserve to poison my body, right? It was just such a sick, vicious cycle. And I couldn't see it, because it was giving me all those warm, fuzzy feelings that I wanted. It was giving me the heart to heart fucking conversations with the friends that I had at the time. And all of us had this trauma bond of sexual abuse. So we would all get drunk and we would all get wasted and talk about all of the things that happened to us. And I thought that was therapy. It was fucking making it so much worse. So kind of going up to the point where it got a little more out of control. We were driving to a hostel to go party for a weekend, and we're driving down the highway, and this guy pulls up beside us, and he was like waving at us and pointing at us, and we didn't know what the fuck was going on. Our fucking car was on fire, and we pulled over, the fire truck showed up, and like, oh my God, it was such a disaster. Nobody breathalyzed us, nothing. Someone else came and got us and we went on our merry way. Like, what's wrong with you where you're driving in a car where like your car starts on fire and it's like, oh, it's okay. Like, we'll just leave that there and we're going to keep going and party. Like, that was so messed up, but it happened. Um, and then the next weekend, I decide that I'm going to go party at this bar. And this is when I kind of hit my rock bottom because at that point, like everything was out of control. I still had my job, but I felt like I wasn't even in control of my own mind anymore. I started to go a little crazy. Like I was driving to work and I wanted to drive my car into a pole. I'd be driving and, you know, like, well, this would be so much easier if I just swerve off the road and fucking deal with it now. And so that's when I knew I really needed to go see my doctor. But my addiction was so deep seated. I would try all the time to quit, all the time. I would make it 30 days and then I would reward myself with more drinking. I would make it 3 months and then I would reward myself with a all-inclusive trip to Cuba so I could get freaking wasted. Like, you know what I mean? It was so messed up. At 23 years old, I was diagnosed with fatty liver disease and it was from drinking. Like I had a biopsy done and everything. And I remember telling my friends I had done a cleanse, like a herbal cleanse. And I told them that it wasn't from drinking, it was from the fucking dandelion root. That's what it had to be. Because who sits down and eats 5 pounds of dandelion root? It's not the drinking. So my denial was like, I didn't have a problem, period. It was just wild to think about that. But yeah, sorry for getting off topic there. But anyways, rock bottom. I go to a bar. I'm with my friend. I lose my friend. I order a drink. And then all of a sudden, I remember pops of in and out of consciousness, like blacking out, but coming to, really dizzy, didn't know what was happening. And I woke up in an alley behind the bar, sandwiched between the garbage can and the wall. And I tried to get up and I just like I couldn't. I felt like someone rolled my ass. Like I got beat the fuck up. And I got up and walked a couple steps and fell right into the middle of the alley. And I just laid there. I didn't care if someone came to drive over me. They wouldn't have seen me. It was pitch fucking black back there. And luckily, two people walking down the alley found me, two good people, thank fuck, who were sober at 2 a.m. in like the worst area of Edmonton, got me safe. So my higher power has saved my life more times than I can fucking count. So many dangerous situations. And after that, it really scared me because I was like, wow, like I'm really gonna fucking die. Like I'm gonna die. So I went to see my doctor and she got me set up with a psychiatrist who diagnosed me with complex PTSD, had no idea what that was, and major depressive disorder because I was suicidal. I didn't want to live anymore. And at that point, I was working for the University of Alberta, had a really good job, and I decided that I was going to go to rehab. And so that fucking saved my life because never at any point in time in my life did I think I would ever need that kind of help. And especially someone like me who has a job. Oh yeah, I have a job. Okay. Like it's absolutely ridiculous. But yeah, so I went to a 6-week intensive inpatient therapy, all women's rehab facility in Calgary, Alberta. Met some beautiful people. And like, man, rehab is no fucking joke. You go in there to deal with the deep, dark demons that you've been sitting with for your whole fucking life. And you have to do it sober. And you can't run and you can't have 8 cups of coffee a day, just one. Like there's fucking rules like you wouldn't believe and chores and all this shit. And I wasn't having it. I was having such a hard fucking time. I remember every day waking up, wanting to leave so fucking bad. And then the 3-week point came and I didn't want to leave anymore. I was feeling good about myself. I was recognizing my self-limiting beliefs and my negative self-talk and was gaining all this confidence. And, you know, people were believing me for the first time in my life, listening to my story and saying, oh my God, girl, like, how did you do that? Instead of that never fucking happened, you know? And so rehab saved my life. I made some amazing connections in there with women who are my sober sisters. I left rehab thinking like I can fucking do anything. This, like I thought that was it. I'm fixed. I'm done. And so I came home and real life started happening. And I got pregnant 3 months after rehab. So I was newly sober and still trying to figure out who the fuck I was. Um, I had my son Giovanni. I bought a house. I graduated from university. I did all these things where I thought nothing like that would ever happen to someone like me. Um, and it's just so beautiful. I was always told I would never be a good mother. My dad always said that to me. It was horrible that I had this like deep seated, you're going to be a bad mom, so you can't have a baby. Like you're going to be a bad mom, so you can't have a baby. And so my dad hasn't met my son. We don't have a relationship at all. And it does break my heart, but like those boundaries are what saves my fucking life. Like I don't talk to anybody that I used to hang out with. I've lost lifelong friends. I've lost all of my family pretty much on my dad's side. And I'm rebuilding from scratch. So all the people that I have in my life now are people who build me up and help me and legitimately care about me, not people who would leave me in an alley to like OD and die. You know what I mean? So yeah, like I accomplished a lot right out of the gate, and I was so happy. But you still have to deal with death, and you still have to deal with losing people, and you still have to deal with hardship, right? And so these last 2 years I know have been like especially difficult for so many people being isolated with COVID and all that. But for me, this year really saved my life. I found myself slipping back into a depressive state, wanting to use, wanting to drink. One of my best friends was murdered. And she was my sober sister from rehab. So she was murdered 2 blocks away from where I used to play as a kid. And it fucked me up. It messed me up because she has a little boy too. And so dealing with all of that was really hard sober, but rolling through those feelings and dealing with them, I know they're not going to eat me alive and kill me. Yeah. So I lost my grandmother as well this year. My son was diagnosed with severe autism. It's been very freaking difficult. I left an abusive relationship. But for the first time ever in my whole life, like I feel like I'm free and I feel like I'm gonna be okay. And that is like the hugest. It's just such a fuck. I'm so grateful for sobriety. I'm so grateful for the sober community because of the abusive relationship. I was isolated for a long time, and I didn't know any other sober people than the people I went to rehab with. I wasn't doing meetings. I was a busy ass mom and made excuses. I don't have time for myself. I wasn't even showering. It was brutal. But now I know I need to meditate every day. I know I need to go to meetings every week. I know I need to keep in contact with my people and not isolate because I don't want to die. I know now that like the things I used to pray for 5 years ago, I have all that. So the things that I pray for now, 5 years from now, in like a healthy mind state, I'm fucking excited. You know what I mean? Like I'm in school for addictions counseling. Never thought I could ever do something like that. I'll be done in 6 months. Like it's fucking incredible. And yeah, like all of the pain and all of the trauma and all of that, like it still hurts, but it doesn't consume me. I don't sit there and ruminate in these things because I know that that's who I was, not who I am. And I'm still learning. I'm still very like I'm 5 years into sobriety, but I feel like I'm just beginning to live again, if that makes sense, just because of everything that's been happening. And so yeah, like I'm just extremely grateful for being able to do this and getting connected with the sober community because it saved my life this year. It really did. Yeah. I think that's all I got.